There we go. All righty. I dropped the agenda into the chat, but I will share my screen as well. So that way we are all taking a look. No, not in meeting. Share. There we go. And I don't anticipating taking the entire hour. Hillary and I just really wanted to touch base on the budget portion of the Youth Apprenticeship Consortium. We're seeing some definite changes at the DPI. I don't know if you've had any, or at the DWD, if you have any cause to connect with them directly, but they've had a lot of turnover at the DWD in the last year. And I think they're still working completely remotely, which also kind of adds another layer of difficulty to things. So when we used to apply for the budgeting, we had up to $900 a student. And the first couple of years that I did it, they would usually around May or June, they would say, oh, you're not going to get $900 a kid. You're going to get this instead because the budget hasn't been passed yet. But then once the budget was passed July 1st, they would be like, okay, you've got your $900 a student. And Hillary's always been very conservative about how many funds we ask for to make sure that we don't have to send anything back. Because if we have X number of students that we are budgeting for and we don't get that amount of students, we have to send back whatever funds or can't claim whatever funds we wouldn't get because we don't have enough students. So we haven't asked for the entire amount. They've changed the way that they now are scoring the grants. So they give you a score based on your last year's performance and how many students completed the program and drops and things like that. So we don't even know what the score looks like until after we apply for next year's grant. So that also makes things really difficult. So we are looking at doing things a little bit differently from our end, knowing that even if we are conservative in the funds we ask for, we'll probably get cut again. This last year, that's exactly what happened. Is we didn't ask for the entire amount of 900, and they gave us a score based on the year before's performance and multiplied that by what we had asked for and said, okay, this is the new amount that we're going to give you. And they did not deviate from that this year. So that makes things a little bit difficult. We also, obviously because of COVID, you guys have been doing a phenomenal job of recruiting kids and getting them out there. But, our numbers based on what we thought was going to happen are not where we budgeted. So we budgeted for, I think, 130 students all told, and we're at 87 right now. And again, we have applications coming in every week. So thank you so much for continuing to recruit kids and businesses. That's phenomenal. But we know already that we're definitely going to have reduced funds this year because we only have 87 students rather than 130. So we have, based on that, we have some recommendations that we're going to make. So Hillary, do you want to, is there anything you'd like to include before I kind of jump into what our discussion was?
No, I think I would just point out that the reduction we're seeing this year is on the district's claim forms. They're not really going to see a difference. That's going to be more on our end and our days and our, we historically have budgeted for some, employer incentives and, like gifts and things like that. So that's where we're going to take that out of because we were conservative. So we're going to kind of shift our thinking and write high. But then we're going to have like some contingencies in place should we not meet our marks. So this year, we are getting less than anticipated, but nothing for you guys to worry about, I guess is my point.
Right.
For your particular school budgets, we'll be able to figure that out on our side.
Right. The one thing that you will see is previously, some things were purchased kind of through a slush fund. There kind of was a general fund that, oh, we'll cover OSHA certifications, for example. We'll just write that directly from CESA 9, or we'll have promotional plaques made for the partners. Or I know one of the districts was doing like thank you baskets for their partners. That's something that we probably won't have just a general fund for those kinds of things. If you want to, with the budget that you have through your district, purchase some of those things, and that's what we're going to ask you to do moving forward as well, to really figure out what your budget is for your district and what you're going to need for those different things. And then that will be paid for with your budgeted funds that you would ordinarily ask for funding, I think 3 times a year. I believe it's December, March, and June that you ask for those. So if you are a district, and not all of them do, but if you're a district that does purchase plaques for your employers, that's something you'll need to budget for. Or if you have construction students that need to do the OSHA 10 certification through NTC, and I think it's $10 or $20 a student, that's something that you'll need to budget for and then get reimbursed in December, March, and June. So questions about that? And I see we got a couple of people in the waiting room. So no questions. Does that make sense as far as, you know, what we're explaining with the budget? I'm seeing nods. All right. So, so that's really what we wanted to talk about today, was just how the budget's going to look a little bit different moving forward than it maybe has in the past because of some of the changes that we're seeing at the DWD. So we will be kind of eliminating that idea of a slush fund or a general fund. If there are things that you know you regularly need for your YA program, whether they're promotional items or certifications or plaques or anything that the students need, you still have the same amount of funds. And we're not anticipating that that's going to change next year either. We're, as you know, Hillary said, we're going to ask for more. And, you know, if it ends up that we get more, we can take a look at that, but we shouldn't, unless there's some drastic cutting to the funds for YA, and that's not what we're hearing right now from the legislature. I'm anticipating that the budgets for the districts would look the same. Hillary?
Right, so that formula of dollars per student plus the, I don't know, what do we call that, Lynn? The, like, I know we've referred to it before as seed money, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's that $500 to $1,000 to kind of get off the ground. And that's based on the number of students that you projected. And then you have a per pupil amount.
Right, so that formula we anticipate leaving alone.
Right. We did talk about at the meeting at the beginning of the year, keeping track of your time. We do need to report at the end of the grant cycle that we have at least 50% in-kind funding, and that in-kind is really the amount of time that you're spending doing the coordination that the grant isn't purchasing your time. And we know that you are spending much more time on this than can possibly be made up with the funding that you get. So I will push that time tracker back out again that I shared at the beginning of the year. And, you know, it doesn't have to be exact, but, you know, even if we can get estimates as to the number of hours you're spending a week on YA or even a month, that will be really helpful at the end of the year for our report back to the DPI. So let me write myself a note on that. Each claim period we have right now, December, March, and June, so that will stay the same. Next year, we're going to include a checklist of information that is now, well, it has been required by the DWD, but now the checklists are going to insist that we keep that information. So just as an example, when your December claim comes in, you'll also need to indicate that you have recorded all of the students' coursework and number of hours up through December, because the new checklist that the DWD is creating, all of them now have that embedded as part of the checklist that we have to report. We never had to report before. Here's the coursework that the student is taking each semester. Now it's going to be required that we report that coursework. So I sat down with Northland Pines at the beginning of in August before school started, and we kind of looked at their list of classes and figured out what would be appropriate for different of the pathways areas. I'm happy to do that with you. You know, we try to be as flexible as possible. We don't say it has to be a dual credit class or it has to be a CTE class. You know, we can try to find classes that at least have some kind of employability skills that would be reinforced in that particular class. But starting next year with the new checklist, we are required to submit that the name of the classes that students are taking and the number of hours we are keeping track of as well. So thank you to those who did write in your hours so far. We have monthly meetings across the state with all of the regional YA coordinators, and we're keeping very close track of the hours so that if it looks like students aren't going to make their 450 hours for this year, we can go back to the DWD and ask for a reduction in time. Right now, it doesn't look like that's going to be necessary. The checklists that have been completed by you, it looks like there were maybe 2 students out of the ones that that were filled in that looked like they may be a little short on hours, and they probably could make those up if they continue to work into the summer. But it looked like most students are right on track for their 450 for the year.
Lynn, I have a quick question.
You bet.
And, so when we talked about the score that we get from DWD, and then that, you know, they use that as a factor to determine our funding, you know, and our grant application and all those things. Are these checklists and these things, are these what that is part of that score too, correct? So
Not
like
this year,
completing all the checklists and all of that?
not
okay.
The coursework and the hours weren't things that were required. We didn't have to report them before, and we don't have to report them yet, but the DWD is continuing to revise all of their checklists. So over the next couple of years, they will have revised all of the checklists, and with the new checklists, and my understanding is anything that has come out this year, which were those 5 areas that I shared at our meeting at the beginning of the year. This year it was, you could use the old checklist or the new checklist, but next year we won't have an option. We'll have to use the new checklist. And as part of those checklists, now you have to report what the coursework is, and you have to be keeping track of hours. So far that's not something that is being scored.
I was just curious because, you know, I know that those are, you know, those are a pain in the butt to get in, but if they're going to affect our funding, you know, we don't want to start this like this downward spiral.
Yeah.
So
I think it's much more like students completing YA, and if they dropped out, making sure that we get those drop forms in as soon as possible. I know we had quite a number of students that had dropped during the year, and we didn't really find out about those until we started getting all of the end of the year forms in, and then, oh, well, this student didn't really do it and this student isn't doing it anymore. And then we had to go back and get drop forms. So that does count against us if we don't complete the paperwork for students.
Okay, so, that's really helpful, because I think that's probably good for Jean to know too, as she's, you know, the one looking for those things and doing the follow-ups and stuff. So thank you.
I will next year for any, oh, no, I skipped one, D. We have a suggestion, and so I definitely want to hear from you about it. The primary job of you as the local coordinator isn't going to change dramatically. You're still recruiting kids and registering students with the ETA and the application and getting those employers, and registering any drops with the drop form. And then making sure that your local mentor has that checklist, or that they're calling it a job book now, because in registered apprenticeship, they call it a job book. So they're changing the wording of that for YA as well. So making sure that your employer has that job book for that student. If you do a mentor training that actually is required by the DWD, I'm going to run a couple of those virtually next year, probably August and maybe again in October for new ones. And then I'll also have it recorded to make sure that that is being offered. If you already have a program in place that you do some kind of training with your mentors, that's awesome. But if you don't, I'll definitely be pushing that out to the mentors, because that's something that we, again, have to assure the DWD that we're doing. One thing that we would like to offer you is, I know in talking with some of you this year, you have very little time in your schedules for doing this work. In some instances, you're doing this as an overload, which means you have no time to do this work. I don't know how you do this work without time. So a suggestion we have, and one of the reasons that we're going to, on our end, change the funds that we ask for, is that we would like to offer to you the option of having me go in and do the 2 of the 3 required meetings with employers. They're required, we are required to have a meeting with the employer and the student at least 3 times a year. And usually that's done at the very beginning when you give them that job book and you set everything up for the student. And then again, mid-year in January to see where the student is at and what they need to be working on for the remainder of the year. And then again, as they're finishing up in May, June, July, to finish that last paperwork that Jean needs for submitting so that we can finish students in the program. Because your time is so short, we are suggesting that if we are asking for more funding, that funding could pay for my time to take those 2 things off your plate. So you would still have the initial meeting with the employers to get everything kind of up and running and get them the checklist. But then, and if you want to be part of those other 2 meetings, I highly encourage that. But if you're really finding your time stretched and you're not able to get those other 2 meetings in, I still want to be able to assure the DWD that we're doing that. So our suggestion is that I would actually coordinate those. So now I definitely want to hear from you. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you. So thoughts about that, Jessica?
Are you thinking like through Zoom most likely, or face-to-face, or what are your thoughts?
It could be. The CESA 8 ones that I did this year were mixed. At the beginning of the year, I did face-to-face, but I did all of my end of the year ones over Zoom, and they worked out really well. So it could be either one. You know, as we are getting more and more vaccinated, you know, we're talking, the first meeting wouldn't be until this wouldn't be for this year's grant, it would be for next year's grant. So the first meetings wouldn't be until next year in January. So I would think by that time, if they wanted them face-to-face, I could certainly do that. But at the same time, it cuts down on travel if I can do them virtually. So, you know, some of our businesses are used to doing work virtually all the time, and it would be really easy for them. And then some of our small employers that aren't on computers a lot, that might be really difficult for them to do a Zoom meeting. So I could certainly do face-to-face with them. Jason, I'm going to call on you. What do you think?
I don't have a lot of stake in it right now. We don't have a student this year that's involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
So
in an ordinary year, when you do have students, is that something that would make your job easier?
Oh, sure. Because this is like the 5th thing off my plate that, you know, I get around to this about 3 times a year where I actually sit down and look at it and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
It'd be helpful.
Oops, sorry.
It'd be helpful.
Okay. Allison, I know you've got a whole lot of kids. So what do you think?
Yeah, we do have a whole lot of kids. But you know, we really just try to keep the connections local and like building those relationships within the community, more to have those one-on-one connections and more locally with the school district versus like an outside source the employer might look at it as. So personally, we try to keep, I shouldn't say we try, we do keep all the meetings, just I go meet with them and Most of them have been in person this year, and some of our final evaluations have began now this year in the last month or so. So I don't really see myself using that as a resource. But in extreme cases, I mean, this year we have a couple businesses up in Minocqua. I do get up to them though, but you know, if something ever happened that it was a location that was more difficult for me to get to, we have a couple businesses in Rylander. I just like try to schedule those meetings on the same day to get them all done on the same time. But I could always see that as a good backup, or, you know, if something happened and I wasn't here or something like that for a certain time, then use that as a backup would be great.
Okay. Yeah. And we did have 6 kids that were not going to finish the program in, gosh. Oh, it must have been May when we were finishing. No, it was this fall. It was right before everything was due in October. And we had 6 kids that their final paperwork had not been completed. So I did exactly that, Allison. I physically went to all 6 employers, and 5 of the 6 we were still able to save. One of them, the student hadn't done the OSHA training and was not going to have time to complete it. So that one ended up that we had to drop, but the other ones we did end up getting completed. So that's good to know, especially for that 3rd one. Even if I went along with you, if you would still have them, I think having that ending paperwork, which has changed now, and there's so many things that you have to make sure are checked correctly. I know that was something that was difficult for Jean this year, was just the number of those final reports that came in that then had to be sent back because this needed to be checked, or a signature needed to be here. So I'm just thinking on that end as well, to save time when we're finishing up that ending paperwork, to have me just there to collect it right there that day and make sure everything is completed correctly. So that way we can submit it right afterwards.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I mean, advice for anyone else, the sooner, I mean, when my students get to the hour requirements that they need and have met most of the requirements, I always think that's a great time to go get that final evaluation meeting right away, just in case there is something missing. Now you have months to complete that competency that they missed, or a certificate that they missed. You have months to get that done versus crunch time in the last month. And personally, me, I like to get that stuff done before summer comes, as many as I can. Then coming back in September and now getting them done really quick and sending them to Jean last minute. So I think for everybody, yourself and others, the sooner the better.
That is a great recommendation. And yeah, something that I hope everybody really takes that to heart, because yeah, I mean, once they hit 450, they're done. They certainly do not need to still be under the YA umbrella, and that way you can get your paperwork sent in and everything can be completed and it's off your plate, and you don't have to think about it when you come back at the beginning of the new school year. So that's a great suggestion. Let's see. And then I think the only other thing that I had, like I said, we don't anticipate any change in funding for districts, but it always every year is dependent on what the legislature passes, and that budget bill isn't due until July 1st. So, you know, if anything really drastic would happen, we certainly would let you know, but it's something that the legislature is also very positive about. Youth apprenticeship is something that they support. So I don't see any major changes happening with that. And then for next year, I've got the affiliation agreement document set to go. So I will link it in the agenda, and I'll send that to you just in case you don't have that up. We are asking as much as possible that if you would fill in the projected students, the number of students and in which areas, and just have your administrator sign it, that would be awesome. We think that you guys are, you know, the boots on the ground, so you have a much better idea of how many students there might be for next year. And we're trying to budget, as you know, ask for funds as closely as possible to the number of students we're actually going to have, so that we don't get docked at the end of the year. So we know, you know, this year we're going to take a bit of a hit just because our numbers aren't there. So as much as possible, you know, take a look at your last year's students and get them filled in if they're juniors and they're going to continue, and then estimate what you think next year's numbers will be for your new students. we're not going to be exactly under COVID anymore, but we'll likely still have people that won't have gotten vaccinated by that time. So it still could have an effect on our numbers. So if you would fill in the number part, and then if you are not able to see your administrator face to face, Hillary said that we do have the option for doing a DocuSign. So if you do need to get an administrator signature that way, you just need to let us know. And it's something that they can do on the computer, so you don't have to physically get them signed. But I think you guys are all face to face at least some of the time, if not completely, correct?
Yep.
Okay, seeing all nods. Yeah, and then if you could I will get you that form today. If we could get those signed and sent back by March 8th, Hillary and I are going to sit down on the 10th in order to write our grant application. So that would be really helpful if we could have those forms back by March 8th. So any other questions or comments or anything I need to know about how things are going? Okay, I'm hearing nothing. If you ever need anything, you know that Jean and I and Hillary are just an email away. So just let us know. But like I said, we're very, very grateful for the work that you do, because we're continually getting new applications in. So that is awesome. And I'm amazed that we have 87 students that are out working through YA this year in the midst of a pandemic. So that's fantastic. So if you need anything ever, just send us an email. Otherwise, we'll have our usual meeting. I think that it usually happens in May, if I saw the agenda correctly, but we'll have one more meeting before the end of the school year, and maybe that one will even get to be face to face. That would be kind of nice to be able to see people before the end of the school year. So if you don't have anything else, I do not either. And I will stop recording.